Okay. Welcome, everybody. My name is Marvell Adams Jr., and I'm the CEO of Caregiver Action Network, a not-for-profit based in Washington, D.C. with a national reach. If you can, while you're coming into um, the session, just feel free to put where you're located at into the chat so we can kind of see where everybody is from. I am in Washington, D.C. Right now. And just really want to welcome everybody to our session today entitled Empowering Caregivers with Financial Strategies for Future Security. One of the reasons we really focus on financial strategies and financial literacy, one, because it's Financial Literacy Month, but also because it's the number two reason that people reach out to us through our help desk. And it's just such a very important aspect of all of the work that we do at Caregiver Action Network to make sure that caregivers across the country, the 105 million caregivers across the country, have the information, education, and insights they need around ensuring their own financial and future security. So just welcome everybody for being here today. So I'd just like to introduce our friends from Magnolia Purpose in Planning, who are our partners today with Caregiver Action Network. First, Teresa Cronin, who's the Vice President of Corporate Advocacy at ASI. Alexandra Zaletta, who is Associate VP of Research and Insights at CancerCare. Joanna Fauzi, uh, Duran, who is CEO of Triage Cancer, and of course, you know me, CEO of Caregiver Action Network. Just really impressed with the knowledge base and dedication of all three of our panelists today. We're going to have a really great conversation and just looking forward to engaging with you today. We will be having a question and answer period towards the end of our session. And so feel free to get your questions ready as we go along. We've got over 100 people that are already signed in. And so we're excited for our conversation today. Just wanted to let each of you ask if you could share a little bit about your organization and how supporting financial planning, which is particularly crucial for families dealing with cancer, dementia, or other life-altering diagnoses. If we could just start off with Teresa. So Teresa Cronin, if you could come on and we will have you start us off with an overview of Magnolia Purpose in Planning.
So thank you, Marvell and Caregiver Action Network, and thanks to our Magnolia partners, CancerCare and Triage Health, here with us today. And thank you, all of you who are joining us. So good morning, good afternoon to all of you. So let me start by just talking about ASI. More than 30 years ago, ASI defined its primary mission as giving first thought to patients and their families and increasing the benefits that healthcare provides. So we call this human healthcare, or HHC. And this commitment to HHC is really the foundation for our Magnolia programs. Over 13 years ago, Magnolia was started to provide patients and their families with support and meeting their evolving needs. Our first program, Magnolia Meals at Home, a meal delivery program for families living with cancer, is still in place today and is actually the reason I joined ASI. So as part of our mission at ASI, employees dedicate 2 to 3 working days each year socializing with patients, families, and care partners so we can gain knowledge and apply it to the work that we do every day. And so at ASI, we truly believe we could only be innovative in our medicines and these programs that are based and rooted from patient experiences. The Magnolia programs that we developed were through these interactions and focus on providing tangible, practical benefits to help bring respite to daily living. So today, we'd like to talk about Magnolia Purpose in Planning, which is a patient-focused hub aimed to connect people with financial, legal, and advanced care planning resources for people living with cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and other related dementias. So as mentioned, this was developed in partnership with Triage Cancer, Triage Health, and CancerCare. And the program provides information to get organized, plan ahead, and complete needed estate planning and medical decision-making documents. So the idea for this program actually started more than a decade ago. Our legal colleagues delivered a meal under our Magnolia Meals at Home program and met a single mom who was facing eviction from her home and was unaware of her rights. So after this experience, the legal team reflected and wanted to do more, as they expected other families were facing similar struggles. So they began hosting these all-day pro bono will clinics for patients, and that was also in partnership with CancerCare and the American Cancer Society. And through that program, it was uncovered that patients needing legal guidance and future planning was a significant unmet need. And as many of you know, following a diagnosis, there are many things that patients, their families, and our caregivers must manage, including treatment decisions, rearranging family or work obligations. And understandably, it can be very difficult to prioritize the many things that they have to think about. So during this journey, it could also be difficult for patients and their loved ones to review the legal and financial questions that should be addressed to help relieve some stress and burden. So today we will learn from our partners and trusted resources about, materials and resources that they have, including checklists, webinars, and tools on various topics. And it really is aimed to help people, living with cancer or dementia plan for themselves or their loved ones and provide a sense of relief and hope. So Marvell, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Teresa. So Teresa, I was wondering, just in the sense of understanding a little more around purpose and planning, for I apologize. I'm my computer's messing up a little bit, so sorry. Bear with me, folks.
That's okay.
So so next, I think we wanted to. I'll come back to you, Teresa. Joanna, I wanted to invite you to come in to just talk a little bit about the financial impact of diagnosis. Joanna, if you could join us and tell us a little bit from your perspective.
Sure. So when we think about the first steps that someone might want to take when thinking about how they are going to be potentially financially impacted by the diagnosis of a serious medical condition, I think there are three first key steps that anyone can take. And the first step is about taking an inventory. So what does your current financial situation look like? Do you have a budget? What are your current income and expenses? What type of insurance coverage do you have or have access to? Do you feel like you have really high out-of-pocket costs? Do you feel like you have really adequate insurance? And I don't just mean health insurance, but I mean life insurance, disability insurance, other types of insurance coverage that might be useful to you when dealing with a chronic or a serious medical condition. And then what documents do you have in place? Do you have estate planning documents? Do you have some of them? Do you have all of them? Do you maybe need to update them? So the first step is really just to take that inventory, to figure out what your current situation looks like. And then the second step is to understand what your rights are and what your options are. And that's going to depend on where you live. So I love seeing all of the states and cities represented across the country on today. Every person has a different option based on where they live, especially when it comes to estate planning. The laws are state specific. So you need to understand specifically what's available to you based on where you live. Do you have different options? Do you have different documents available to you where you live to be able to document your wishes? So understanding what your rights are and what your options are is also really relevant when thinking about what employment protections do you have access to? What health insurance options do you have available to you? And are there different options that you could be looking at to reduce those out-of-pocket expenses? So step one, take an inventory. Step two, understand what your rights and your options are. Step 3 is to triage. And this really is how we came to the name of our organization. When you're diagnosed or your family is dealing with a chronic or serious medical condition, thinking about what do you have to do? What decisions do you have to make? What information do you have to learn and process? And so step 3 is triaging all of that information that you've just collected based on what your current situation looks like and your rights and your options. So you could start by making a list of the things that you need to do. And don't feel like you have to do it all at once. So that's the action of triaging, is figuring out what you need to do first, prioritizing, and then maybe, once a week, taking one of those things and crossing it off the list. So do you need to make decisions about work? Do you need to actually change your health insurance coverage so that you can lower your out-of-pocket costs? If you don't have a budget, where can you start? So we have tools and resources available to help you take these steps, whether it's creating a financial spreadsheet and just figuring out what your income and your assets are, to do you need to actually complete estate planning documents? Do you need a new power of attorney? So each one of those things is a different thing that you can check off the list to make sure that you have in place to try to address some of those financial concerns.
So, Joanna, if I put myself in the shoes of a caregiver, and just my head is spinning, I'm not sure what to do. What would you say if I just needed to fill it in? What's the first couple of steps that families should take when they receive a diagnosis that's going to significantly impact their lives and finances?
Well, I think it can be very overwhelming if you try to think of all the potential things at once. So making a list and prioritizing can be helpful. Those are some of the things that you can find on Purpose and Planning. So we actually have a checklist to getting organized where it talks about what are the key documents that you should have in place? What are the key things that you should know where they are, and collecting that information. And this is sort of just practical information for everyone. So, we see situations where there are natural disasters, and making sure that you have documents in a place that is easily accessible. So does that mean a physical place, or does that mean starting an online file of really important documents that you need to be able to keep track of, or copies of those documents, so that if you needed to access them somewhere else, you could do that? So there are some very kind of basic practical steps that people can take without feeling like you have to bite off more than you can chew at one time. And so Purpose and Planning provides some of those first steps.
So going a little bit deeper, because I heard you say documents several times. And so, what legal documents should families prioritize to ensure they have their affairs in order?
The documents are going to depend on someone's individual situation and what they should have, but also where they live. So different documents exist in different states. But generally speaking, everyone over the age of 14 should have, or age of 18, depending on the state that you're in, should have at least 4 key documents. So the first is a financial power of attorney. And this is where you are appointing someone to make financial decisions for you if you're unable to make them for yourself at some point into the future. So imagine, for example, you're in a car accident and you need to be able to pay your rent. Could a family member access your bank account and be able to make your rent payment for you? So something as kind of basic and daily that we don't really think about, but having that financial power of attorney in place can prevent those types of challenges down the road. And then there is also the ability to appoint someone to make healthcare decisions for you if you aren't able to do that in the future. Now you can choose to appoint someone to be your healthcare power of attorney. And this is usually in a document called an advance directive. And the advance directive can have a couple of different parts where you can choose someone to make decisions for you. Or if you don't want to do that, you can write down all of your own decisions in case you're not able to communicate them for yourself at some point in the future. So you can choose, and that's sometimes referred to as a living will. But the living will and the healthcare power of attorney are 2 pieces of an advanced healthcare directive. And then the third document is having a will. So deciding how you want your assets to be distributed if you were to pass away. For some people, they might also feel like they need a trust, which is kind
Mm,
of a more complicated version of a will. Where someone has a more complicated financial situation, a trust might be more appropriate, and there are financial implications of choosing a trust over a will, including whether or not the will goes through a legal process called probate. So, understanding the pros and cons of each one of those options is part of the estate planning process and figuring out which documents are appropriate for your situation. But at a minimum, everyone should think about that financial power of an attorney, the advanced healthcare directive, and then also a will and or a trust.
gotcha. And that got me, thinking more about, especially when you say the advanced directives. So for how do families approach planning for long-term care, and are there financial products or services that can assist with this?
Long-term care is a more complicated topic because what most people don't understand is that health insurance coverage typically doesn't cover long-term care. So, long term care is what we think of as if somebody needs a nursing home for a long period of time, as opposed to maybe just a couple of days after somebody comes out of the hospital. If somebody is living in a nursing home facility for a longer period of time, that's referred to as long term care. And health insurance, including Medicare, does not provide coverage for long term care. And so most people are unprepared for how to pay for long term care because they haven't proactively purchased a private long term care insurance policy. So in the United States, most people are getting access to long term care coverage by being able to tap into Medicaid. But Medicaid has very specific requirements in terms of your income and your assets. And so people might find themselves in a financial situation where they're having to spend all of their savings before they can get access to Medicaid coverage for long term care. So there are some definite things to think through when thinking about if I were in a situation where I would need nursing care and to be in a facility, how am I going to pay for that? What insurance coverage do I have available to me? And then think through, do I need to actually buy long-term care insurance? And do I still qualify for it? Because generally speaking, once you have a pre-existing medical condition, it is much harder to buy a long-term care insurance policy because the pre-existing condition protections that exist in health insurance don't apply to long-term care insurance. They can look at your medical conditions and your age and even your weight in determining whether or not you will qualify for a policy or how much it's going to cost you. So it is very important for people to think through how would they cover the cost of long-term care if they needed it at some point in the future.
Got it. Wow. Joanna, thank you so much. I can just see how sessions like this are extremely helpful because there are just so many intricacies that have to be understood. So now we're going to turn to Alexandra. Alexandra, if you could just share a little bit about what's it take to start to that conversation with a loved one and some strategies behind that.
Yeah, thanks everyone for the opportunity to speak today. And I'm so glad we have so many folks joining. I'm seeing a lot of energy in the chat already. Um, you know, I think we have some important steps here. And the first is just recognizing, frankly, the need and the opportunity to have this kind of conversation. I know that talking about money and talking about finances can be really uncomfortable for folks. And frankly, our culture here in the US is oftentimes is to not have these frank conversations. But I think it's really important to just sort of acknowledge at the gate that more than ever, people are facing financial challenges due to the costs related to their illness or providing care for a loved one. And that's just the hard reality of this. And those challenges can create medical debt. They can create loss of productivity because of time away from work. They can create serious emotional stress, and it can sometimes even really force people to make really difficult trade-offs to offset these costs, whether that's things like skipping doses of a medication or not following up with their other care providers, or even having to choose between paying their basic medical bills and the basic cost of living, having to choose between your treatment and paying for food, paying for housing, paying for electricity. So this is sort of the reality. And I say this because I just sort of want to set the background here that um, all of us, I think, are in a position to have these planning conversations early and to try to partner with our family members to understand how can we work together to set ourselves up for success, because this is really about creating stability and peace of mind for everyone involved, even though we know that having these discussions can be really uncomfortable. In terms of having some specific tips to approaching conversations, anyone who's had conversations or difficult conversations with family, first of all, knows that timing can be everything. And so choosing the right time and the right setting is really essential. Trying to find a time when you can have kind of a calm, a private space where everybody can focus is the first step towards setting yourself up for success. I think the problem and the challenge, especially if you're facing, a difficult medical diagnosis, is that oftentimes we find ourselves in crisis and everyone's sort of reacting in that moment and trying to have that discussion when it's really emotionally charged. And it's understandable to react in the moment, but that's actually where we tend to run into a lot of barriers. So trying to find that time where you can just have that sit down and have a little bit of protected space is really the first step forward to having that productive discussion. I think if you're a family member supporting a loved one, we're here to open that door by expressing concern, but not pressure. So you're trying to open the conversation as an offer of support, but not a mandate. So it's things like saying, I know this isn't easy to talk about, but I want to make sure your wishes are respected and that we're working together to figure out how to get on top of these finances so that we're not so stressed in handling them, and using we language, really talking about this as a collaborative effort. How can we plan for the future together? I think is really important so that you're showing that you're a partner. You're going to roll up sleeves and, walk with them to help get to the bottom, whatever the need is. And recognizing that, acknowledging this can be tough to think about. Again, I'm just here to help however I can be helpful in the moment. I think the other challenge is sometimes people struggle with knowing what language or what kind of help to offer. And so being really specific with this can be helpful. So rather than saying something really open-ended, like, do you need help with money? It's really offering to help with specific tasks. Can I help you take a look at that medical bill or look through the paperwork? Could I help you by looking up some financial assistance programs? Would it be helpful if I talk to an attorney to get some information about setting up legal documents like a power of attorney? Coming in and bringing it in specific tasks, I think helps to make this a little bit more digestible for folks. And that's really, again, you don't have to solve everything in that one conversation or that first conversation. You can start with that more immediate need and then build towards longer term goals so that you are, again, kind of chunking this out and working through this in a really systematic way. Um, and I think it's walking this line between, on the one hand, you want to be transparent and honest. You share your current financial realities, you talk about what the potential costs are and the need for long-term planning. But at the same time, you also need to respect the boundaries of your family members. And if they shut it down in that moment, that's not the time to force it. You're going to need to let them know that you're available and you're going to need to revisit that conversation as needed. So sometimes these things really are a process more than just a one-time conversation. And if you can get that door opened, that's a really great opportunity to start maybe even scheduling or planning. You know what? Let's check in a month, or why don't we check in every month and just sort of see what's coming up? Are there new unexpected costs? That way you sort of have this shared understanding of like, okay, we're gonna have this check-in, we're gonna have this conversation, we're gonna work together, and sort of have that mental expectation of knowing, you know what, this is the day we're gonna have this talk, so that it's not coming out in a surprise or people don't feel ambushed or back-footed about bringing up the conversation a second or a third time.
It really makes me think of what's that saying, that the best time to have this conversation was before today, and the second best time is today. And so when it comes to financial planning, but so tell me a little bit about what are some of the common financial pitfalls that families should be aware of and try to avoid when they do this planning.
I mean, I think the first part really is sort of the mindset and the awareness. I do think that, if you find yourself back-footed or you're feeling this unexpected financial pressure, you know, you're not alone in that experience. There's so many folks that feel like they, you know, you feel like you did the right things, right? Like you got your health insurance, you're paying your premiums, you thought you were on top of things, and then it turns out that support is not what you were maybe expecting, or you didn't have the coverage that you were expected, as Joanna was alluding to. So I think, you know, taking some steps to have some awareness and understanding about the kind of insurance plans you have, the kind of coverage you have is really important. But also if you're caught back-footed in that moment, unfortunately, that's the experience for a lot of folks in this country, that we still don't have easy transparency or understanding sometimes about, you know, what's going to get paid for, who isn't, what doctor can I see, what doctor can't, what's my actual out-of-pocket cost going to be. That is the reality and the challenge of what we're facing. So I think building that awareness and not playing a blame game is really important, but rather, as you're saying, Marvell, it's like, okay, let's take the assessment of where we're at and then try to figure out how to move forward. And really, I would say the second piece is not having the open communication. I think is one of the biggest barriers and the biggest pitfalls. Feeling like you have to keep it a secret, feeling like you can't have that discussion with your loved one. The reality is that silence, you know, you're trying to do someone a favor, not step on their toes, respect their space. Those are all really valid instincts, but the silence can lead to stress. It can lead to misunderstandings, and it leads to missed opportunities to figure out support and figure out a plan moving forward. So again, if we can have these open discussions using some of the tips I was just talking through, that's really going to help people set themselves up for as much success as possible wherever you are, whether you just got that diagnosis, whether you're 10 years into this. To your point, there's always that opportunity to open that door and move forward together.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Alexandra, because and just looking at the chat, you know, and seeing individuals understanding that it's so difficult when because you have to kind of expect the unexpected, you know. No one really plans for an accident to take place or injury, and unfortunately, being able to at least be prepared for those certain circumstances. I know personally in my family, we never talked about finances growing up, and being able to know that how can we, you know, open those conversations up? You know, I'd be curious to hear, you know, what strategies can caregivers use to bring families into the financial discussions in a supportive way? You know, you've given a lot of great tips on how to approach those conversations. Anything else you would share about how you can kind of, you know, broach that subject and bring the family members actually into the conversation when they're hesitant to do so?
Well, again, as I said, I mean, it is the balancing act. I think the first part is having the courage to open the door to have that
Hmm.
conversation, you know, and I can tell just from the folks who've signed up today, you know, you're looking for strategies and you're looking for opportunities. And so being willing to take that risk, I really think is that important first step. And then, like I said, and I don't mean to repeat myself, but really it is, you know, you're trying to meet your loved one where they're at, find them at a time that's not the highest stress moment, that's not right as you're walking out of the doctor's office, or you know, right as the bill comes in the mail and you both have this emotional surprise. Really trying to set up a time and space where you can be successful in that discussion. And then again, I would reiterate, this is really a conversation about partnership, that you want to walk with this person, that you want to be there to be a resource and to be an ally, and also that you're willing to bring in other experts to support as needed to help them in this process, so that it's not you two even alone, right? Whether that's using the resources here. We'll talk a little bit, I think, in a moment about more about some of the support available through the website and our organizations. But again, you know, creating that connection with others and bringing in that additional support and knowledge, I think, is really helpful and can help build trust. You know, you can be honest. This is what I know. This is what I don't know. But we're gonna work together to figure out how to get to the bottom of this and how to make progress so that this is not so stressful and not so overwhelming.
Got it. Wow. Thank you so much. Wow, a lot of great information all around. And so, you know, I imagine that there are some questions that folks want to pose. And so if our team that's helping behind the scenes could let us know about maybe a few questions we can answer and pose to our panelists.
Marvel, I am happy to share a couple of the questions that have come over via the question and answer function here. I'm going to start out with a question about what, if any, suggestions are there on how to, for caregivers in particular, to supplement income in case of cuts to Social Security or other, really, really important and impactful programs?
Yeah, that is a very good question, and not to go down the rabbit hole too much, but certainly uncertainty in any way when it comes to people's finances, no matter what your circumstances might be, can really interject a lot of concern and fear. And so the question of perhaps supplementing income or really proactively finding ways to be able to be prepared. Anyone have some thoughts on that question?
Well, I will just echo that there is a lot of uncertainty around what might happen with Social Security in the future. But I would say there are some practical steps that people can take. And so first, I would suggest that people actually take a look at their Social Security statement and make sure that they have that printed out. Because that's something that used to be mailed to us every year and is no longer mailed to us. Now we have to sign up for a My Social Security account online and to get access to information about our Social Security benefits. And that's true of individuals who are receiving Social Security retirement benefits, but it's also true for individuals who have Social Security disability benefits. So you want to make sure for everybody, regardless of if you're currently receiving either of those benefits, you want to make sure that you have a record of your Social Security account so that it shows the work history that you've had over the years and what you will receive from Social Security or what you are currently receiving from Social Security. So that's sort of step one, is to make sure you have that documentation. The second step is whether or not you have the ability to supplement your income is based on another set of factors. And the first is, are you working still? Do you have the ability to work still? So we know that many people go back to work after they start receiving retirement benefits to be able to supplement those benefits because they're limited. And so, we see people who go back to previous jobs. We see people start whole new careers. We see people engage in the gig economy. So, do you want to drive for Uber or Lyft? So there are some additional opportunities if people are able to go back to work. If people aren't able to go back to work, that's a lot harder. And so do you have other types of retirement accounts? If you have Social Security benefits, do you also have access to a pension? Do you have a 401k or a 403b or some other type of retirement plan that you were contributing to while working in addition to Social Security? So how can you leverage those types of accounts to be able to supplement Social Security benefits? But if you don't have those accounts because you worked in jobs that didn't give you access to those accounts, or you didn't have the ability to contribute to those accounts over your work history, again, it changes what your options are. So there are some options, but they may not work for everybody.
Got it. Cool. What other questions do we have?
Yes, thank you so much. I hope that answers that question. I really appreciate I think some of that additional guidance. Another question that came through asked about there's kind of two prongs to this. One is that there's this understanding that it is nowadays nearly impossible to purchase private long-term care insurance policies. And even if you are able to, the premiums are quite high and probably out of reach for many folks. So I think that the question is really asking, is that, I think, understanding correct, or is there perhaps a little bit more detail to that you guys would like to expand on? And if so, what other financial vehicles, if any, exist to make some of those long-term care insurance policies more accessible? Is there some avenues to pursue that could help offset some of that burden.
Yeah, that's a great question, Nicole. So to our panelists, it, is long-term care insurance, still really a viable option? We know it is an option, but for some it may not be a viable one. And if not, what else could be considered?
Well, I will jump in and just say that unfortunately, we don't have the same type of consumer protections for long-term care insurance that we do in other types of insurance. And so premiums are exponentially higher. They are going to be based on medical underwriting. So they're going to be based on your medical history and your current medical situation, and will be priced based on that information. So oftentimes people are priced out of being able to get long-term care insurance, but it also does depend. So you might not be able to afford a full coverage policy, but maybe you could afford a minimal coverage policy. So unfortunately, because it will be tiered based on your medical information and the costs involved. But the way that long-term care insurance is if you want more coverage, you will pay more for that coverage. The really only alternative to private long-term care insurance is Medicaid, and Medicaid's coverage for long-term care specifically. That is going to be based on someone's eligibility for Medicaid, which is based on your income and your assets. There are different rules for Medicaid and long-term care than there are for Medicaid to cover other types of healthcare. And it is going to depend on the state that you're in. So the information is going to be specific, and that is information that we can share with you at Triage Health. So the options are limited, but there are some other strategies. So if somebody is already in a situation where they're needing to pay for long-term care and they can't get Medicaid coverage, or you're in a period of time where you are having to spend down your assets in order to qualify for Medicaid, then looking at what are the financial assistance options that exist? What can you tap into? How can you identify places to reduce expenses in some places and increase income in other places? Do you have access to a life insurance policy? Maybe you're in a situation where you would rather cash out your life insurance policy or take a loan from your life insurance policy to be able to cover the cost of long-term care. So there are some financial strategies that exist. Again, they're not uniform, and everybody's going to make decisions differently based on their individual situation. But that's when talking with a financial planner is very important. There are also some asset protection strategies around protecting your home and assets for family members who are not in long-term care. And so then you might want to be thinking about talking with an attorney to make sure that you're setting up those types of asset protection options, like potentially a special needs trust. So there are resources, but you have to ask some questions and make sure that you're making the best decisions for you so that you get all the background information to be able to do that. And we do actually have a panel of financial planners who will talk with individuals who contact us for assistance. So there are some free or low-cost options that exist too for people.
Thank you for saying that, Joanne. I know, knowing that they can reach out to Triage Health and being able to, access those panelists, financial planners, is a really big resource to have. And I think that I saw a question: can we meet remotely? Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, I was just going to speak to that. So Triage Health is a national organization. We help people in every state, and we do that all over the phone. So we don't have to be in person to be able to talk with you. And I'll actually put that information in the chat.
Yeah. I spent the first part of my career early on as a nursing home administrator, and these are the type of questions we would answer for folks quite regularly as they were considering having a loved one move to our nursing home. About how do they how does the spend down work? What about their assets? And I see a question here of, what about the caregiver? If you spend down all the assets, what about the caregiving? And some of those conversations do take a more intimate conversation with a financial planner, but also understanding that, in allows for, in some instances, being able to reserve some of those assets depending on certain circumstances. Nicole, do you have any other questions that folks may be posing?
Yeah, I think a little bit about what you touched on in the last answer will tie nicely into a couple of questions that we've seen that are a little bit more connected to nuts and bolts and logistics of, I guess, kind of the execution of some of these pieces of guidance. One is, so a lot of this sounds like it's a smart move to, have, I guess, kind of some guidance and connect with a financial planner or advisor, and also perhaps a lawyer that has some background in perhaps like elder care, things like that, that may have a little bit more understanding of some of these nuances. The question goes on to ask about, if so, when is the right time to bring in those folks? When is the right time to put those resources together so that you can start getting some of this in place? Is there, do you reach out to a financial planner first and then a lawyer second, simultaneously? Can you give a little bit of a picture to that?
Wow. Yeah, no, that's a really good question of just kind of knowing where to start. Anyone have any thoughts on that? Just it certainly is going to be dependent upon the individual circumstances, but Joanna, from what I heard you say earlier, one potential first step is reaching out to Triage Health to be able to talk with a financial planner. But the question sounds like lawyer first, financial planner first. Okay, where do we start?
That is an excellent question. I think that I would suggest starting with understanding what you have available to you based on where you live and your financial situation, and doing that inventory of what do you have currently, what do you think maybe you need to have, and understanding your rights and your options. I think doing that first is really important before actually contacting a financial planner or an attorney, because in both of those circumstances, you need to have, they're going to actually ask you a whole lot of questions based on your situation. And so doing that work ahead of time to collect the information about where you're currently at is going to make those conversations more productive. So understanding, I have an advanced healthcare directive, but I don't have a will. But I'm thinking maybe I need a trust because I might be considering long-term care and need to understand the asset protection piece. So understanding even just what any of those words mean is a good first step, and really getting some background information on your estate planning options or on your financial situation so that you can go in and ask good questions. Because sometimes if you don't know what you don't know, it's really hard to be able to get advice about your situation, and to know what's good advice and what's not good advice, or what's good for you or not good for you, so that you can really take that information from an attorney or a financial planner and make good decisions that are the best for you, because they're going to give you more options. They're going to tell you what the law is or what your financial options are, and you're still going to have to be the one to make the decisions. So if you can go into those conversations educated and have a good understanding of where you're at, they're going to be much more useful to you, and then you'll be able to make decisions from a better place. So I would say that was my long-winded answer to the short answer is, it doesn't matter who you start with, but it does matter that you actually have done some pre-work before going into those conversations. And really at Triage Health, that's our goal, is to provide that background information so that people can make the best decisions for themselves. And then we can certainly connect people with attorneys or legal organizations or financial planners to be able to take those next steps.
Got it. And just to our other pals, Alexandra, I saw you put in the chat some information as well. Could you speak to that a little bit about CancerCare's Hope Line?
Yeah, and Joanna, I mean, I think you really sort of underscored the reality, which is that it can be so overwhelming to be clicking through so many websites. We have a beautiful website with Magnolia Purpose and Planning that I think is really focused and brings people to the best information. But sometimes to add on to that, having that live conversation with a real human can just be so helpful when you just need to talk through what's going on and have someone else kind of walk you through questions and understanding what your biggest needs are. So CancerCare is a cancer organization. So this conversation is specifically for folks that are supporting a loved one or family member with cancer, but we offer support not only for people with a diagnosis, but also family members, caregivers, and so on, which is such a pain point. It's so hard to find that support sometimes for caregivers. So if you call our Hope line, and I put the number in the chat here, we're open Monday through Friday. You can have that conversation. A master's prepared oncology social worker is going to pick up the phone. You're going to talk to a real human, and they're going to try to understand and walk with you to understand what are the pain points that you or your loved one are experiencing. Our organization offers direct financial assistance. We also have connection to other sorts of resources that may be able to offer financial assistance. We have free individual counseling and emotional support for the folks that are managing stress or just dealing with larger caregiver stresses that have to do with trying to provide this kind of important financial support and all the other support that you're trying to do in service of your loved ones. So I think it's really nice to just be able to have that live conversation where someone will talk you through stuff, offer you direct support, and then also make links to other resources as well, if that's what's needed to kind of help you in the moment, whether that's the financial question or all the other realities that we face when we're supporting a loved one with a diagnosis.
Got it. Alexandra, thank you so much. And even some great suggestions in the chat from our audience today. Someone mentioned going to your area agency on aging is a great resource for information on anything regarding aging and older care. And I was wondering, Teresa, would you have anything else that you could add to the conversation regarding just giving people advice of where to start?
Yeah, absolutely. And just first of all, just appreciate Joanna and Alexandra, just a ton of information and wonderful resources. You know, I'm reflecting on a personal situation, Marvell, that I went through with my uncle who was living with dementia. And unfortunately, none of this, it was organized, right? So we spent a lot of time trying to find his social security information, trying to find bank account information, trying to understand what his wishes were at the end of his life. And it was very stressful for my family because my father was also living with cognitive issues at the time, and he was the power of attorney. So I just was so grateful that I was aware of Triage Health because I was able to go to the website, take a breath, work with my sister and try to really navigate this. But without Triage Health as a resource to me, it would have been very difficult for us to try to navigate that without our own. So my advice to anybody is to really just seek out the help, ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And sometimes there's advocates within your family that are better situated to have a conversation with a loved one than maybe yourself. Like sometimes you're the daughter and the son, and your parents not necessarily want to speak to you, but they may speak to a brother or a sister or somebody else that they feel more comfortable talking about the subject matter with. So, my advice is to really just seek out the help. Like I think somebody mentioned in the comments that often we wait too long to have the conversation, and trying to deal with this in a very stressful time is not always it just makes it difficult for everybody. So I think, Marvell, that's what I would say is just don't be afraid to ask for help and connect to the resources. I think a lot of people don't know these resources exist through Caregiver Action Network or through Triage Health. And that is really what Magnolia Purpose and Planning is trying to do, is just really just try to make sure that people, through this hub can connect to resources and get the help that they need.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is difficult to just, be organized. I saw someone put in the chat, sometimes we just don't know what we don't know, and keeping in mind that if you're able to be a little proactive, bookmark the page in your web browser. It's kind of like the digital way of saving a pamphlet that you received and being able to hold an information so that when you do need it, or having it in a safe place, that you have the information that you need. Nicole, I think we might have time for one more question if there's one hanging out
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to point out there were some questions about how to know like what the rights are state by state, which I think a resource was posted there in the chat. So thank you, Joanna, for flagging that as well. I guess that one question to maybe conclude on would be advice on bridging the gap between work and SSDI or Medicare. How can someone navigate that? Because oftentimes we hear about how difficult that can be when you're making that switch over and you're kind of now experiencing a pain point with finances. So any thought or guidance on that?
So that make sure I understand. So the question is around making that transition from employer and insurance to Medicare.
Yeah,
I think that's what I heard.
the specific question is any advice on ways to bridge the gap between stopping working and getting approved for SSDI or Medicare?
Gotcha. Joanne, I saw you come off of mute there, so I'm going to go to you first.
Yes, this is actually a really common question because unfortunately, when somebody is applying for Social Security disability insurance or SSDI benefits, there's a 5 full month waiting period where somebody has been approved for benefits but doesn't actually receive any cash support. And so from a practical level, that is a huge barrier for people because you are not working because of your medical condition, but you aren't getting any financial support. So this is actually an advocacy opportunity that has been worked on for many years, but we haven't seen Congress take this issue up. Except for the ALS community, I would say that is one exception to the 5 month waiting period because of advocacy efforts. So for someone who is in that financial gap, there are some limited options. So do you also qualify for supplemental security income, where that could help bridge a gap because that gets approved and someone starts receiving benefits right away. So you might get kicked off SSI once your SSDI benefits start, but it can help bridge the gap. If you're in a state with state disability insurance, that might bridge a gap. So we're talking about California, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Hawaii, or Puerto Rico, that all have state disability insurance programs that could help potentially bridge that gap for you. And then do you have access to a private short or long-term disability plan? Either one that you bought on your own directly from an insurance company or one that you get through an employer. So a lot of people forget that they have access to those policies through an employer because the employer pays the premium. So it's always good to go back and double check that that isn't something that you have access to at work. And those typically, again, start right away after maybe a week waiting period. So that can also help bridge that gap for money. With respect to health insurance, those options are going to depend on your individual situation, but it might be continuing your employer plan through COBRA or state COBRA. It might be getting a marketplace plan. You might qualify for Medicaid based on your state that you live in and your income level. So there are some other health insurance options, but this question is actually exactly what we do at Triage Cancer and Triage Health, is help people understand what all those options are for them specifically based on where they live.
Well,
Joanna,
thank you
that
so
was
much.
so detailed. I was just going to add a quick comment, and you highlighted how
Please.
much this is sort of based on individual circumstances, but I was also going to mention that's also where the advocacy and support organizations can come to play. Some organizations also have direct financial assistance for certain circumstances and under certain incomes. And so obviously every person is in their own situation, but whether you have a social worker that you could speak with, if you're dealing with, at a doctor setting, that's a place where you can start that conversation. Calling a place like CancerCare, reaching out to Triage, all of these organizations just to try to get some insights. We know it's never enough, but we hope it's a step towards bridging you as you move towards, through that 5-month period. So I just want to put that out there as well to, that's something if you have the fortune of having another family member, right? That's a task that you could ask somebody, could you go, work or help us see if we can track down whether or not there's any sort of funds available during this gap period.
Yeah. Alexandra, thank you so much. So, wow, this has been an amazing conversation and so much to absorb. And so let's just I'll just take a moment perhaps just to recap. Code, if you could go back one slide to the action steps. Yeah. And so, we've talked about a lot of things today, and just keeping in mind that, for the steps to take, start budgeting and financial planning. And one of the things we saw in the chat, it's like, so if I'm already in this as a caregiver, what do I do? And the difficult reality is that that planning ahead of time may not have taken place, but being able to ask the questions now and understand what your current circumstances are and see what is possible. Researching and applying for relevant insurance and benefits, of course, that may be possible where you are right now. As we talked about earlier, starting those conversations with loved ones sooner rather than later, and knowing that even if it doesn't seem like a perfect time to start it, it's a better time to start it than it will be days or weeks or months or years later on. And so using some of the tools that were provided in the web chat, obviously you can go to caregiveraction.org for information regarding today's webinar and viewing it again, but also some of the web links that were put into the chat. And making sure to really schedule that time with your family so that you can have that opportunity. And then lastly, just keeping those important documents and ensuring they're in a safe place, and whatever that may mean to you. That could be that it's in a binder, like for me, it's in a binder in our closet at the top, but there's a copy, that we have kept safely elsewhere. And then, compiling those and making sure you have the legal and financial documents available and that they're accessible for many individuals. That means online, so you can bring it up on your phone or bringing it up at a laptop as you can log in wherever necessary. So, last, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody for spending their time with us today, for our speakers and panelists and all of the participants that joined our chat, for all of the additional resources that are provided. And this webinar will be available on demand through caregiveraction.org. And so feel free to go there for information on today's session, as well as much more. Just to remind you, this was a collaboration between Caregiver Action Network and Magnolia Purpose and Planning Partners at ESI, Triage Care, and CancerCare. And really, this is such a timely conversation because this month being Financial Literacy Awareness Month, this really is the opportunity to learn more, to increase awareness about financial literacy, and ensuring that we have the tools we need. So our goal across the board with Magnolia Purpose and Planning and Caregiver Action is to provide practical financial strategies and resources to support families, that are navigating, unfortunately, life-altering diagnoses that may come their way. So just a huge thank you for everyone for your time, collaboration, hard work during this webinar and making it a success, and to the entire Caregiver Action team for all your support, and to each and every one of you across the country that have logged in today, and especially for every one of you that each day show up as a caregiver to provide the insight and support and guidance that your loved ones need. So thanks everyone for a great session, and enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.